Okay, ready.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to this Green IFA podcast. I'm Simon. We're lucky enough to have Bas and Terry, our co-presidents of the Green IFA group, here today to talk about the year ahead. We're already, I think, started with a bang with the year ahead, with everything Trump related, which we'll get into in a minute. But first, New Year's resolutions. Some people have them, some people don't. If you do have them, what are they? And if not, we'll do an exercise, a little bit of an exercise on what they could be. Do you have any New Year's resolutions?
I don't really, because I never really follow through on them. So then it's only painful already at the start of the year. But what I did feel like I need to be more in the mountains. You know, I'm Dutch and I was born in the wrong country because I love mountains. And if there is one problem in the Netherlands, it's a lovely country, but mountains are not very, very common there. And I was now this winter again in the Dolomites, so Italian mountains, and I'm just so happy when I'm there. So I was a bit like and it's all quite easy. I went with a night train to Innsbruck. It's within a reach, so I need to do that more often and forget that also in a weekend you can do these kind of things. It's not so far out.
And it's beautiful there as well.
And it's really, and I just get happy there.
Were you neck deep in snow?
It was more snow than previous years, so it was not neck deep. Yeah, if you go very high up, but no, it was quite some snow, so that was also nice. And I had blue sky all week, so it
beautiful.
Was, yeah.
Terry,
Need to do that more.
Terry, what about you? Do you have any?
I would also pick the mountains. I think I also have to be in the mountains, but I have a different New Year's resolution. I'm usually a very stressed person, so I do things very fast. And now I'm trying to do things a little bit more slowly because I feel, there's this sense of seeing what is happening around you. And this morning I went to the parliament with my bike, and usually I'm a racer, so I go very fast. And this morning I was really taking my time. And I mean, it also has negative sides to it because
you were too late.
Actually, you're late in the parliament. No, but for being a little bit more in the moment, that's my New Year's resolution. That some of the things that I do, I want to do them a little bit more slowly and mindfully.
Nice. At the end, I might ask you if you have a political New Year's resolution, but we leave it till the end. It's boring. We'll get into it later. 2025, the week that we're in, depending on when people are listening, we have an insane fires now raging across LA. Just before we talk about that, Bas, you mentioned earlier before we came that you had a bit of a shocking week last week in another crisis hit zone only from 2 months ago, which was Valencia with the floods. Yeah. What was it like being there, firstly?
It was really, it was a shocking experience, to be very honest. So you come out of a nice New Year's spirit, and then the first visit is Valencia, the area of Valencia. Now, I think to me what was most impressive is I didn't fully realize, but you think that you are in a mountainous area. You know the images where the water needs to go through a valley or whatsoever. But here, this is in the plains of the region of Valencia. So the mountains are further away. And the people living in those plains, there was no rain. So on the day when the disaster was there was no rain where they lived. It all happened in the mountains. But for them, it was like, it's a dry day, so it wasn't as bad as predicted. But it was bad in the mountains. And then the water just came later on, so hours later, through the plains. And then the amount of water that went through, where entire cities just were swamped under 2 to 2.5 meters of water, it's unimaginable what you saw there, and the amount of water that passed through.
And then still 2 months later, it's lines of...
Yeah, but entire cities were just drowned. So basically all the houses on the first floor were totally devastated, and in some of the towns 95% of the cars were devastated. So yes, they're cleaning up, but they're still busy, and the people are busy. And let's be very honest, the political response was not very good either, and this is a very much understatement. So no, they're still really cleaning up all the mess of the flooding and of the politicians.
And meeting people there, what was the atmosphere in general?
I mean, we met friendly people from our sister party Compromis there, but you notice and you can't blame the people. The trust in politics is super low there and rightfully so. If you see how the politicians were more busy in blaming each other instead of helping the people, we as politicians in general did a very bad job, and there you see the impact is that people are really fed up with them. And they feel abandoned, they feel alone, and that you noticed very clearly. You didn't feel warmly welcome there. As soon as they realize you're a politician, and you almost try to apologize for being a politician.
Between the floods 2 months ago and the impacts that are still ongoing there, the fires we see now, and then the political environment we're in, which seems very anti-climate science and a huge uptick in the far right. Terry, what's your overall view? Because it's not going away. These climate incidents are getting worse and worse, but we seem to be in a worse political situation to actually solve them.
I mean, to be honest with you, Simon, I'm still sometimes having these moments where I really cannot believe that this is the reality that we are facing and the political discourse that we are facing. Because, I mean, Bas is completely right. The response in Valencia, and I think also to other climate catastrophes or, natural catastrophes was bad. But in a way, I feel that the political discourse or the reaction, the public reaction doesn't take from this kind of failure what it actually should, because we should really look at how we can prevent this from happening, or at least make it not as bad as it is going to be if we don't do anything as it looks right now. And to me, like now we are going to have elections in Germany in 6 weeks. If you look at what role the climate debate plays in the overall campaign mode, it's to me unbelievable.
As in not there.
As in not there. I mean, it's there, but it's really under the surface. It plays a very, very minor role in the overall debate. And I mean, obviously, I'm a Green politician, so I find that shocking anyway. But I would also say, as a citizen, as a person who wants society to work, who wants people to live in a good way, to me, the ignorance and the power of denial that is still there. And I don't mean this because people are, climate denialists out of ideology, but just the possibility of us as a society looking the other way, don't look up, look the other way, is striking. And I think that this is really a problem that we will have to turn around, because 5 years ago climate was all over the agenda. We could see what we could manage in these 5 years, what we could do if we wanted to work together, not only as Greens but across the political democratic spectrum. And now we are a little bit back at square one, or even worse, we had the realization and then we draw back from it. So for me, this is the big task ahead for us. How do we make sure that people understand, if we want these horrible consequences from being avoided, or at least being mitigated to the biggest extent, we have to do something about it. And for me in the campaign, but also now here in the political climate in the European Parliament, I think this will be our task as Greens.
And I think in general, right, trust in institutions, trust in science, that's all evaporating. And that's exactly what the far right wants, right? They want chaos. They want to create a kind of mistrust in everything, because then the only solution is a strong leader. And be aware, the far right has the strong leaders.
Authoritarian recipe.
Exactly. That's the authoritarian recipe. And that's again, bringing it back to Valencia, what I also found shocking, and it's a bit also typical European legislation, we do have a floods directive, right? So we do have a floods directive that is obliging all the regions that are susceptible to flooding to make flooding risk maps. And guess what? Valencia made terrific flood risk maps. And we talked to a scientist, and she showed the maps. They were spot on. They were very, very accurate. So here again, you see science can help and is helping. They provide you with the information. But what happened? The politicians put it in a drawer. and only took it out after the disaster. They were pretty good maps. This is the problem, is that as long as we are not listening to science and are just, yes, we are obliged that you make a map and do it, and then we don't do anything with it, then of course people don't have how were we not warned? But quite often it's not because the scientist was not telling it, it's quite often because the politicians were not acting on it. And then there's fake news that it was all a bigger scandal or whatsoever, and then people don't know what to trust anymore. And I think this is one of our challenges as well, to who can you trust and who should you trust, because otherwise, if you don't trust anyone anymore, we're in big shit. Sorry for the words.
I mean, I think maybe that's the defining thing at the moment now, is trust and what is real and what is not real. We'll talk about Trump in a minute, but with disinformation and the Elon Musk world and direct impacts on the German elections coming up, has disinformation won? Has it won? Is it already past the fact?
No, I don't believe that, because I think that's what they want us to believe. Every single victory that they take, and Elon Musk is exactly that type of person to me. He just wants us to believe that we shouldn't even pick the fight because he's so overpowerful now with the influences that he can take, that people are not going to understand and going to act in a responsible way and also have rational realities that they are faced with. So I think, yes, there are these tendencies, and I think we have to be very, very serious about them. And I think we see climate denial, we see anti-gender movements, we see a backlash on a lot of things that we have achieved over the past years or even decades. But I think we also have to always remember that at the end of the day, I believe that if we fight in a way that we can actually win this. And I think that for me, you have a lot of examples that are setting us back in the last years, but you also have these examples where election campaigns seem to already be lost to the far right, or the authoritarian grip on society, like for example in Poland, was so strong that even I was working on Poland for a long time, where you had this right-wing authoritarian party that looked so powerful, and then when people went to the streets, when they worked together, also when they overcame their differences. If you look at the majorities that we will have to build to fight this battle, it will be difficult. I'm not denying that, but then we can win this. And I'm also sure that we have the tools in the question of Twitter, X, in the question of social media, of disinformation, that we can stand up to this kind of attack on democracy, because that's what we have to call it. We just have to use them. And that's our task as politicians now, to push the Commission with the tools that they have to really stand up to this.
Very specifically on the German elections, do you think Elon having this sit down with the far-right leader will have a major impact on election day in Germany?
Well, I think it did both. It did basically normalize and in a way also rationalize some of the things that they are doing, and it makes them look influential. On the other hand, I think it also was a wake-up call to a lot of people seeing the dangers of this. And I think the discourse that we have had, and let's be honest, it's not something new. We have had this debate on Facebook, we have had this debate on TikTok, we have had this debate when Twitter was taken over by Elon Musk. But now people like my mother, she's on no social media platform, but she suddenly started talking to me, which platforms are you on, how are you using them, because she heard about this and she felt that this is something that is so dangerous for, indeed, as Bas was saying, the overall trust in democracy and our institutions, that she started caring about it. And for me, that's a very good sign that people are realizing this. And I'm not saying it's going to be an easy battle and that the far right is not going to have a good result in the German elections. But I'm saying that I think we can also, with the arguments that we have and with forming, united responses to it, we can also turn this around again.
no, nothing is lost yet.
Yeah.
So there is a battle, and I think the only silver lining in all this is that the debate is now shifting very fast. I think to a very long time we were underestimating the impact of social media and all that, and we were a bit like, yeah, okay, you have lunatics, but whatever. Now there is a serious debate on the positioning of social media. What do we do with these? You see that these techno guys from the US, they are now kissing up with Trump. And people do realize this is not just a hobby of people. This is fundamental to a democracy. And I think that realization is very important. Now I think the political response needs to be there. And we have some of the tools, we have some of the legislation in place, the Digital Market Act, the Digital Services Act. But now, of course, we need to apply it, and we need to be daring to apply it. And that's going to be a battle. And there, Europe needs to stick together. And there, I think I'm most concerned, is Europe united enough to do this? Because if we are not going to do that as a European level, then of course you cannot beat it. Then it's an American conquering that we will be defeated by. So now it really requires a European response, and I think the naivety we have left behind. But now, what does that mean for our actions? And the jury is still out. Let's call it that way.
Okay, from silver linings then to coping mechanisms. We have an inauguration on Monday. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, there's not much silver lining there, no.
Very open question. How do you cope with the idea of 4 more years of a Trump presidency?
I always have the same thing that I do. It was after the elections. I did it last time. I did it this time. Even though I do realize that the second term with Trump in the White House is going to be much worse than the first one. I think we have to be realistic about that. He knows now how the systems work. He has a lot of power. He has the institutions under his control, even the Supreme Court. So we can clearly see that it will be much worse than the last time. However, I always take my strength from actually seeing, and you can still look at the pictures from the massive reaction in the US that took place with the women's marches, with the way that also society became more aware of the danger that is coming from people like him. And for me, this is what I do. So on the day, I don't watch what is happening in Washington. I'm watching old footage, or, not so old even, but footages from demonstrations of people standing up for democracy. And we recently had this in Germany, when this remigration, in quotation mark, revelations of the far-right party came out. We had hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. And this was not something that was organized in weeks and months. It was something that was a very reflex reaction in a way by society. And I think these moments, even if they're just moments, they still have to give us the reassurance that there is a big and strong majority in our societies that believe in democracy and that want to defend the values of democracy. And I think this is what I'm also going to do now with this inauguration that is coming up.
On buying Greenland, or maybe invading Greenland or Panama or Canada, I think we're well used, and it's maybe also a bit boring to get into that again. But there's something below that, right? There's policies underneath that are also getting through as a result. What's the impact there that for Europe, but also for globally, when we don't pay attention to the headline, but we know that really terrible stuff is happening kind of behind the scenes?
I think the biggest problem is that for Trump, the entire world is transactional, right? So the entire idea of multilateralism, where we work together and profit together, that there is no zero-sum game, that we can all be better if we work together. I think that's the biggest problem, that Trump is just wiping that off the table. He's just believing in a zero-sum game and everything is transactional. So if I do something, I need to get something back in return. And this is not the basis of multilateralism where Europe has been built on and where Europe should be the defender of internationally. And I think that's below the surface. So there's a lot of rhetorics that probably you should not take literally. but you should take him damn serious on what he's undermining. And he's undermining basically the international kind of code of conduct on how we should work together. And there, of course, China was already not playing by those rules. We now have a United States that at least for 4 years is not going to play according those rules. He will not buy up Greenland right away, maybe, but it all just shows you how a kind of idea that the United States is a partner where we can rely on, well, for now, that's not at the table. So this means something for Europe. How are we going to act on that? How are we going to react on that? But more importantly, how as Europe are we going to give an alternative that also is appealing to the rest of the world? Because I think that's the problem for now. The European alternative is not very visible. So we're not putting something credibly on the stage that people feel like, oh yeah, that could be the model as well. And I think that really requires a Europe that is much more, the urgency needs to be there. Until now, if I see the council reactions on everything, I find it talking about a different world, right? These council conclusions you get, they are awful. It's as if the world is just, carrying on and Europe is just not realizing how urgently we need to really change our gear. And I think this is the biggest problem. Who's going to do that at this moment in Europe? I don't see that kind of clarity.
You mean prime ministers and leaders of national level?
Olaf Scholz, I don't see him doing it. Macron is talking about the classic axis of Europe. I have the feeling Macron is also having some other problems. But then who are we dependent of at the moment? It's really who is now a leader that could step up and give some guidance also and give that alternative. You might even become dependent of Tusk as an answer. That shows you a bit where we are as Europe. And I think that's to me one of the concerning questions for 2025 is will there be a credible European response that is urgent, but also really not just, copying or being close to what the US is doing, but that we are really that alternative that is appealing and is putting kind of the human response central instead of this transactional attitude that
and I think
Trump has.
This is like the geopolitical point that Europe needs to step up its game. But I think you can also basically draw the conclusions for our own societies because Trump has been reelected. Could we see this coming? Could we, see how the society shifted, how he was basically feeding on insecurity, on anger, on, disinformation, you name it. I think we could all see it,
Yeah.
And I think we all see it in our own societies, It's not something that Europeans are superior to, It is happening. So to me, it's also again and again the question, how do we create politics in a way that it's actually responding? And I'm not saying, there are easy fixes. We just do this and then the insecurity of people is going to be gone. I'm also not trying to rationalize why people vote for a person like Trump or fascist in Europe. There is no argument that you can give, even if you're unemployed or whatever, why you should vote for fascists from my point of view. But for me, the question substantially is how in such a difficult geopolitical and general political situation, we can still do politics in a way that it actually responds to the problems of people. Because some of the kind of gear that people like Trump are running on, it's very obvious and visible, People are scared of the future. People don't know how to make ends meet, They're insecure. And I can even feel it myself, There are a lot of things that, growing up was so clear and so forever, there is going to be democracy becoming stronger and human rights on the forefront. And, all of these things are now put in question. And I think for me, this is something that demands a kind of political reaction that delivers. When we are in a much more difficult situation when it comes to majorities here in the European Parliament, in the Council also, we have more and more governments where you have far-right parties that makes European decision-making much more difficult. So for me, these kind of challenges, bringing together a rational way of doing politics that delivers for people, that starts with the individual. A person has problems paying their rent. How do I create politics in a way that it delivers for this person? At the same time, also being clear that in the majorities that we have, we will have to make much more compromise. And this, I think, it's a massive challenge and it will need some spearheads. I'm also totally aware of that. But I think it also needs very responsible politicians that don't look at how can I blame the other one for the problem of the people, but how can I deliver on actually solving that problem? And I think that is our task also here in the House as Democrats to make that happen now.
But can I ask maybe a bit more on a personal level with it, in terms of your political careers as Green politicians, where you've seen wins in places like the Netherlands, you've seen previous wins in Germany, we've seen other countries where we haven't done as well recently. In some places, we're painted as the status quo establishment politicians now, parties, and on the other side, the complete opposite. What's your view on that? Because we're kind of caught in the crosshairs a little bit between being the oppositional force that needs to bring radical climate change now and those who want to get in and want to deliver. We always get squeezed in that scenario, don't we?
Yes, but I think also it's a bit where we are positioning ourselves, right? I mean, I do think that if you look at the message of change, I mean, look at all the green campaigns throughout Europe, it's always a message of change. It's in different shapes.
It unites us everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. It's different forms and shapes, but it's also very clear Greens getting into politics is because they are unhappy with the current situation, the current mechanism, the current economic system we're in, and we want to change it. And in that sense, yes, we have always been those change makers, but at the same time, we also, and that's the interesting, maybe the most complicated part of our electorate, they want change, but they also want responsible politicians. So on the one hand, we need to plead for revolution, and on the other hand, they do expect that we take responsibility, which is compromising, is, not standing on the sideline and just shouting. And this is just where we need to position ourselves. You can say, oh, we're caught up in the crosshairs. I would say this is also defining us. We are not conservative. So
we're going to get our hands dirty.
We want to change it, but we're also willing to make our hands dirty and not standing on the sideline just shouting, we want a revolution. And I think that's of course sometimes played out more in a better way than in other cases. But I do think that is also defining us. So don't shy away from it and be proud of it. Maybe that's also one of those things. Maybe at a certain moment we have lost our narrative on being proud of that again. So I think that's also, if you already don't believe in it yourself, then how can you persuade people to believe in you?
Could we learn, dare I say, from the centre-right conservative now that's done very well and adopting ideas from different political movements that are more radical?
You know what?
Throw a grenade in on purpose on that.
So this was the end of the conversation.
No, you know what I'm sometimes jealous of? Because this is really something that frustrates me in my political work. And I know where it's coming from because we care about everything. We are very holistic people, so we look at everything at the same time. What conservatives and center-right parties are, I believe, sometimes better at than we are, is prioritizing. They have this one topic and they just, through every single channel that they have, for a certain period of time, they just go out on and on and on about this. And I think because we are, we always want to solve everything at once. We are very often looking at the full set of the problems, which I think is also something good to have that in mind. But it also makes you sometimes scattered, like your energy is everywhere at the same time. And I would like us to be able to focus more, to prioritize more, and then to say, look, this is the issue that now we are talking about. This is the message, and this is what we are going to do. And we still see and understand the other problems, but then we have to have this and then next, And that's something that I would like us to learn in certain situations, not losing the holistic worldview that stands behind our whole political program and ideology, but to be in the way how we do actual politics and everyday work, to be a little bit more focused there.
Absolutely agree. And also be clearer. What do we want to protect? So where do we want to maintain the status quo? Because I think this is we are now part of the democratic status quo, but I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the European democracy and I want to be part of it. I want to maintain and I want to make that also future oriented. So there, yes, we are status quo. But within that democratic system, we want changes. And there we are fighting for and showing a bit that where we are, status quo, and then prioritizing where we want to have the changes. Let's show that, because I think that's the conservatives are super status quo. That's why they're conservative. But they sometimes sound like they want to change much more. Whereas they built this Europe, right? It's always amazing how they criticize everything they did their own. And they even do it to the extent, and I think that's also where they are better. They have no limit. You know, just
you have to say it in a whisper.
but it's sometimes amazing how they get away with it. For example, this very simple example of the deforestation law. They made it. They supported it. They even invented it. They came up with it. And then 1 year later, disastrous bureaucratic law. This needs to change.
It's the Greens' fault.
Who on earth got with that idea? Get rid of it. They were like, what is this? And no one is like, hey, but that was your idea, you know? And this is, you know, they have no shame. And sometimes maybe we should be a bit more shameless as well without doing disinformation.
Yeah. Okay, there's a section here where we'll try to see if it works, because we're going to look a little bit at the policy side now. Something like the clean industrial deal was something that you, Bas, worked on really quite a lot. Without any jargon, if possible, why does that matter to an ordinary person in Europe?
It's our future economy. I can't make it more simple than that. It's just about our future economy as Europe. So this is indeed why, to me, already in the campaign for the European elections, it was clear that industrial policies will be one of the priorities of the new Commission, or should be one of those priorities, which I'm happy it is. Then it still depends how you're going to do it, because I think here, of course, what is the biggest danger is that we are going to throw a lot of money at our industry without any guidance, so that a lot of money will just immediately disappear from Europe again, and then also jobs will disappear from Europe. And this is about future jobs for Europeans. And so we need to make sure that also these jobs will stay in Europe, so that all the money, there will be money needed. We're not shying away from it. I campaigned in the Netherlands by saying we need more European money. I can tell you, all the experts would say, don't do this in a Dutch campaign. But I felt this is too important to not campaign on it.
But do you think it could deliver for the average worker in Germany?
Well, I think yes, but I think the biggest problem we had with the Green Deal was that in the end it stayed a European project. So it was a lot of the member states all signing up to the Green Deal, but it was a bit, okay, Commission, you do your thing. And there we see the problem now, that then really the real sincere belief in the member states that this is our future economy has never been there. Now we can change the words. We can call it Clean Industrial Deal, which is basically the continuation of the Green Deal for our industry. But if we again fail to really make the member states and the local politicians believe that the future economy of Europe will be a decarbonized, innovative economy, then we are having a problem. And you can't fix that from the European level. I think there we still have the biggest problem. You can have all kind of wonderful ideas here in Brussels, but if they're not really implemented because politicians believe in it, then we are having a problem, because then it means that in the end they will find ways just to keep everyone happy, throw a bit of money at everyone, and that will not change anything. And then we will lose from the big powers of China and US,
and maybe
no matter what.
Maybe it's too big a question to fully answer now, but if we have majorities in the way they are at European level, but also now across Europe, how do you convince the centre-right or even the centre-left sometimes when it comes to moving that agenda forward?
I think so far, they are still saying we want to decarbonize our economy as well. Even Draghi's report, now I get too technical, sorry for that. But Draghi, he is the former prime minister of Italy and also did something with the European Central Bank. But he wrote a report, and he's really not the most progressive politician I've ever met. But the guy was also very clear by saying, We need a new economy. Europe is asleep and we need a wake-up call. And there needs to be a lot of money going there. But more importantly, we really need a European strategy for our future industry. And decarbonization must be the aim of that. From a very conservative, pretty, I would say, classic economist, it shows a bit that in that sense the debate has shifted. Now, the problem is to convince those politicians more, because, you know, the sad thing is, if you talk to industry, they are quite often more convinced of that direction of travel than the politicians. The problem for the industry is quite often, but am I sure that Europe will keep course? It's the insecurity that is killing our business. It's not, of course, if we can improve on reporting, be my guest. But it's the insecurity and the lack of clarity from Europe that is killing our industry. And sorry to say, but it's the conservatives who are now even are accelerating the insecurity. It's not helping the industry. And they are realizing that. They don't dare to say that up loud yet. You know, you see also here European industry is a bit afraid of the conservatives. But if you ask them, honestly, they do realize that there is no alternative to the Green Deal agenda. But yeah, they're not there yet to say the Greens are our friends. But secretly, we will get there. We will get there.
But if I can start from the individual again, I come from an industrial area, and I mean, if you look at Duisburg, it's a city where you have I'm proud to say, the biggest European steel mill, integrated steel mill. And there, if you talk to the workers there, they can clearly see that because they have demands to Europe and they want these demands to be part of a clean, a green, whatever industrial deal. Because they see that the future is only if we actually decarbonize our industry. But they are now afraid. And I think they are also, you know, there is an argument of why they are afraid that if we don't take the measures now that are needed to do that, industry is just going to disappear altogether. So they say the European Union is not only a nice to have, you know, coordinating industrial policy, the European Union and working together on a European level is an absolute precondition to have industry in Europe in 10, 20, 50 years. And I think that this is something that we have to understand because these things are connected. The questions of whether we have financial support, whether we have a different set of state aid. I don't want to become too technical either. Whether we have
close there.
whether we have trade policies that actually stand up to players like China now, who want to, you know, basically make steel production in Europe impossible, or also, you know, crash the car industry. So for me, this is really the answers that are there that people are asking that we have to give right now. And the Clean Industrial Act for me is a key aspect in this, but also a number of other things, you know. So I really think we are now at a moment where Europe has to deliver in a very, very difficult, as you say, setup when it comes to majorities. So it's a moment of truth, but we are ready to take it on because this is going to decide about, and I dare to say, not only our economies, but this also has a massive impact on our democracies. Society. Because I know what is going to happen if these big industrial factories, if they close, people are going to fall into unemployment, and we know who is going to try to pick up the pieces of this. So for me, it's a question of how is our economy going to look like in the future, but also can we defend our democracies? These issues are very closely linked, and Europe is the key player in this, Europe as a European Union.
And we need to be daring more, right? I mean, very simple. If we now, and this is a bit of the problem, we are quite often immediately going into very technocratic language, right? So we, for example, say, okay, there needs to be money, but then we need to have conditions for it. So it's conditionality. Then, of course, the conservatives will say, oh, you make it complicated bureaucracy, we should not do that. And that sounds great. But the consequences is what we're doing right now. The consequence of that conservative attitude is that we are giving European money to Chinese companies to build batteries in Europe without any condition. And all the profits go back to China, and there they use it. Just imagine that China would say, oh yeah, you European company, come to China and we give you billions of money on top of that. No one would do it. No one is doing it but Europe. And this is why we need those rules. This is why we need those changes. Otherwise, we're just giving money, European money, to Chinese companies who are willing to come to Europe for that. But that's not the way to go. And this is really also, we need to be more outspoken on that. We let the conservatives play the narrative, it's bureaucratic. No, we are making sure that the European money and the European investment stays in Europe and that it's helping our economy, our society, our jobs, and our democracy.
I think it's something. I think this whole aspect of green industrial deal, we might do a whole separate podcast on it, because it's very interesting once you go down into the detail of it. I think for listeners. But we have to finish up. So I come back to your political resolution. Well, I do two things. Firstly, it would be nice to hear, in all this context, and there's a lot of doom and gloom and everything, what gives you hope for this year, and what would be a political resolution? What do you want to achieve for 2025?
Can I start?
You start.
Because I have a very obvious hope-giving event that recently took place. My sister gave birth again. I have a niece, a new niece. I'm Auntie Terry. You can call me that. I love it. It's my favorite role right now. And I think, she was born right after the election of Trump. And to me, we had this week, I felt so shit. It was horrible. And then it was like, we went to the hospital and there was this baby, and it was just fulfilling me with so much hope and happiness, and also energy to say, I want to fight for a world where this baby is going to be able to live to her fullest, and this is something that is giving me hope and that is giving me energy to continue, and to say what I want to do this year. I think it's a New Year's resolution in political terms that I usually do. I want to smash fascism, and for that we will give a hell of a fight here to the fascists in the European Parliament.
I think we can sign up to both of those things, actually. Bas?
No. I think on the one hand, really. What I want to do personally and what gives me hope, we live in a beautiful continent. Europe is really a beautiful place to live in. And I still think it's the best place in the world to live. And we sometimes forget about that. And yes, there's so much shit going on. And of course, there are things that are not going well. But just living in Europe, it's really a great place. And we have so much, we have great people, we have great nature. It's all pretty close to each other because we're quite small. I think we sometimes forget about what a great place we are living in. And I think that's maybe also a kind of a New Year's resolution, that we should also put that more up front. We're and also I am quite quickly getting into technicalities and the political speech, right? But sometimes just be very simple. Guys, be proud of what we're having and fight for it. And then I subscribe to the fights that Terry is putting out there, but also do it with fun, pride and humor. I think that's also going to be important.
Yeah. Bas,
Amen.
Terry, thanks a million for joining, and thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.